Judge Crawford, thank you very much for making time for us.
My pleasure. Glad that we could do this.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Let's start with, once again, this election looks like it's going to come down to a battle over which way the court leans. What does this race mean to you?
Well, to me, it's about whether voters want to have a justice on the Supreme Court who is pledged to be fair and impartial and protect the rights of all Wisconsinites under our Constitution and under our state laws. Or do they want somebody on our Supreme Court who is a partisan politician, who has a history of driving a pretty extreme right-wing agenda and is looking to politicize the court and to, as he says, use the court to help conservatives win elections? I think voters want to protect our Supreme Court and have a fair and impartial justice.
One of the things you've talked about is you think Supreme Court justices need to understand how to keep communities safe.
Yes.
How does a Supreme Court justice do that? What does that mean?
Well, there are cases presented to the Supreme Court every year that involve the criminal justice system and ask the court to resolve issues on things like the scope of police authority to search a home or search a car. Issues can come before the Supreme Court about what evidence comes into a criminal case, and those can affect the ability of prosecutors around the state to bring people to justice when people have harmed our communities or harmed crime victims. Another way that the Supreme Court can protect the safety of our communities is when cases come before the Supreme Court involving corporate accountability. Sometimes big businesses and corporations do things that harm our safe drinking water or our clean air, and those cases can end up in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So as I see it, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has a responsibility to consider the safety of our communities as it's making decisions, and I would certainly do that as a Supreme Court justice.
You mentioned one issue in your opening question there about impartiality. Voters are going to hear a lot about this.
Yes.
But let's talk about how we get there. As you know, the State Democratic Party has given your campaign $1 million.
Yes.
Why take the money?
Well, the Wisconsin Democratic Party has endorsed my campaign. They are interested in supporting my candidacy, and I welcome support from any legitimate organization in the state, including the Wisconsin Democratic Party, as long as they understand that the candidate they're backing is the one who is pledged to be fair and impartial. I'm not going to pre-decide any cases or prejudge any cases that are currently before the court or likely to come before the court. Very sharp contrast with my opponent, who is openly talking about how he would decide cases that are now pending in the court or on their way to the court, apparently based on information that he's reading in the newspapers, certainly not based on the facts of those cases, the arguments presented by the lawyers, or on any discussion with the justices on the Supreme Court. I've pledged to keep an open mind in every case and not to prejudge any case. I think it's prejudicial to the parties. So as long as supporters understand that about me, I welcome their support.
But do you have concerns it reinforces to the voters that really they're electing a red robe or a blue robe when they see parties backing candidates?
You know, I think what voters want is to be sure that the person they put on the Wisconsin Supreme Court is looking out for them and protecting their rights under the Constitution and under our state laws. And as a judge now, I don't look to whether a litigant in my courtroom is a Republican or a Democrat, a liberal or a conservative. Those are not questions we ask. I look to what they're presenting in terms of the evidence they're presenting to me, the legal arguments they're presenting to me, and I make decisions that fairly apply our laws and our Constitution and protect the rights of everyone before me. And that's what I'll do on the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
There's an expectation we could see another $50 million spent in this race. Does that just like shock you and like concern you as well?
Yeah. You know, it's a little mind-blowing to think about numbers that large. And, you know, I think it is, you know, concerning that these court races have become such high spending races, but at the same time, I want voters to understand what this race is all about. I want them to understand what my experience is, what my values are, what my judicial philosophy is, and what kind of justice I'll be. And I want to make sure that they understand that my opponent is someone who is trying to drive an extreme right-wing agenda. And it's going to take a lot of money and resources to make sure that voters understand what the race is all about. And I have a great campaign team that I think will make sure we have the resources we need.
Well, let me ask you a little bit more about that, because while I think both candidates are going to talk about being, you know, open-minded, impartial, do you worry that there's also going to be an expectation like, hey, I do want you to stand up for a woman's right to choose. I do want you to stand up for issues around if there's going to be a limited access to abortion or changes in the photo ID law. Do you sense this expectation that you are going to be expected to stand with the other liberal justices?
You know, what I would say about that is that I want voters to know about my values as a person, things I've worked for. On that issue of abortion rights that you just raised, I'm a mom. I have been through pregnancy, labor, and birth, and when I was going through those experiences, I wanted me and my doctors to make decisions about my health care, and I trust women to make those decisions. And if there is a legal case that comes before the court that turns on those kinds of rights, legislation that seeks to limit those rights, what I've pledged to do is to apply strict scrutiny to those cases and to make sure that women's rights to exercise bodily autonomy, make decisions about their own bodies are protected. And does that mean that I am pre-deciding any case? No, because any case that comes before the court is going to turn on the specific facts and law of the case. And again, this is a contrast with my opponent, Brad Schimel, who is openly saying that he thinks an 1849 law should be enforced as an outright criminal ban on all abortions, no exceptions even for things like sexual assault or the health of the mother. And he is the one who is prejudging, pre-deciding cases and telling people how he would vote on issues that are pending before the Supreme Court. That's not something I'll do. I will tell voters about my experiences and values so that they can understand that these are issues I take very seriously.
When you look at you've been a judge, you were in private practice, you worked at DOJ.
Yeah.
When you look at your career, there are topics and issues that you have gotten involved in, and we're seeing even before the court now where Justice Hagedorn is going to recuse himself.
Yes.
Have you set a standard on how you would recuse yourself if a case came before you that was a conflict?
Yeah, I would do what I do as a circuit court judge today. There are occasions where I will, on my own, identify a potential conflict in a case, and when that happens, or a party may raise a request for me to recuse, I would handle it at the Wisconsin Supreme Court the same way I do on the circuit court, which is to examine who the parties are in that case, what the legal issues are that are presented, look at the facts, and make a determination of whether I can be a fair and impartial judge. It's a very case-by-case determination, very tied to the facts and law of a specific case, and that's the way I'd handle it on the Supreme Court.
Let's talk about some of the campaign commercials that we're seeing in the early going here. And we saw commercials about the sexual assault or the rape kits.
Yes.
Prior to when Brad Schimel became Attorney General, thousands of these sexual assault cases or rape kits went untested for decades. Your campaign ad claims, quote, he let those cases sit for 2 years while survivors waited for justice.
Yeah.
Is that a fair argument?
Absolutely. So there was an initiative that started with Brad Schimel's predecessor at the Department of Justice, the prior Attorney General, to identify and locate any untested sexual assault kits. And that was initiated after a change in law where the legislature required all kits to be tested. So there had been a lot of work done under Brad Schimel's predecessor to identify and locate those kits. When he came into office, the same staff at the Department of Justice said, look, there's this backlog of 6,000 kits. This needs to be prioritized. These kits must be tested. Those kits contain the DNA that can help identify the perpetrators of those terrible crimes. Brad Schimel did nothing for 2 years. I think he got something like under 10 kits tested out of a backlog of 6,000 in a period of 2 years. And, time is of the essence. Delay is a delay of justice in those cases for those victims. And instead, Brad Schimel was pursuing right-wing causes like entering a lawsuit to try to overturn the Affordable Care Act, which, if it had been successful, would have resulted in tens of thousands of Wisconsinites losing their health insurance. That was his priority, is to pursue those kind of right-wing causes instead of prioritizing Wisconsin crime victims and Wisconsin community safety.
So I asked him about it as well because I knew I was going to talk to both of you about
Yes.
this. And he seems to say, look, it took time to get the money, took time to set up the inventory, get consent to conduct the tests, hire outside contractors to test the kits, and eventually he gets 4,100 of these cases tested. Does that seem reasonable?
Well, I think he put his foot on the gas when it became an issue in his re-election campaign. And only then did he prioritize the testing of that rape kit backlog. As I said, when he came into office, he had the opportunity. He could have asked for the additional funding from the legislature. Instead, he asked for funding for a Solicitor General's office, which he was given. The legislature gave him what he asked for, and he used the Solicitor General to push these kind of right-wing cases that did not protect any Wisconsinite. That Solicitor General, an out-of-state attorney he hired to the Department of Justice, we now know was meeting with conservative groups around the country to develop a legal strategy to overturn Roe versus Wade. Those were the things that were Brad Schimel's priorities in the first years of his term as Attorney General, not protecting crime victims. He did it when it was in his self-interest and became an issue in his re-election campaign.
Do you think redrawing congressional maps is a pivotal issue in this race?
Well, I don't think it is, because there is no case, to my knowledge, that has been filed involving the congressional maps. There is no pending issue before the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I know there are political groups and people who are talking about a potential challenge. I don't know what the legal basis for such a challenge would be. It's not something that I have either publicly or privately expressed any kind of opinion or view on. I simply don't know what the facts would be or what a legal theory would be to revisit the congressional maps in Wisconsin. So I don't think that is an issue of importance to this race. As a justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, there is a legal challenge to those maps, or really, any legal case. I'll keep an open mind until I've seen what the evidence is. I've seen what the attorney's arguments are for how the law should be interpreted. On the Wisconsin Supreme Court, I would deliberate with my colleagues and hear what their perspectives are before I make a final decision. I'm running this race to be fair and impartial and to protect the rights of Wisconsinites under our Constitution and our laws, and that's what I do.
Well, as you know, there was some pushback around a call that you were on. The Democratic donors call billed as a chance to put 2 more House seats in play, a move that Republicans say shows that you are committed to redrawing congressional districts to benefit Democrats. Was it a mistake to be on that call for an event with Democratic donors?
I was happy to enter that call. What I did was spend about 10 minutes introducing myself, talking about my career, my experience, why I believe that I am the right candidate to be elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, because I'm committed to being a common sense justice who will always try to make sure I get the facts right and apply the law to protect the rights of Wisconsinites. I was not there to strategize on any case involving the congressional maps. It may be that that group talked about that after my brief appearance. I didn't stay for the meeting, and political groups like that can talk about whatever they want to talk about. I was there to introduce myself and talk about why I believe I am the right candidate to be on the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
In hindsight, do you wish it was different or didn't participate?
No, of course not. I am not running this race to tell anyone how to exercise their First Amendment rights. I'm not running this race to tell any group that thinks they might have a legitimate legal claim that they should or should not be discussing any legal issue. They're free to do that as they want. As I said a couple of minutes ago, any organization or any individual who wants to support me, I welcome it, but they need to understand that I am committed to being fair and impartial. I am not going to show favoritism for any partisan organization or any partisan cause. I have never been a partisan politician. I've never been involved in party politics in our state at either a local or statewide level. I don't intend to start that on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And again, my opponent has been. He's been a partisan politician and very involved in Republican Party politics in the state for a long time. That is the lens through which he views the world, and that's how he's going to approach the Supreme Court if he has the chance.
One final question then for you. We live in hyper-partisan times,
Yes.
and a lot of it happens in that building
Yeah.
across from where we sit, which is where also the state Supreme Court is also housed.
Yeah.
The next 8 weeks are expected to be pretty intense on where people stand, where they want this court to go. How will you navigate that time and pull back from the hyper-partisan rhetoric that's going to come and sort of drive a path that says, this is who you are going to be?
Yeah. I'm just going to stick to my roots. I grew up in Chippewa Falls. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know any judges. It was only when I was in my mid-20s that I just thought, I want to make a difference. I want to work to solve problems in our communities and to protect people's rights. And that started my path to law school and has been, my guiding light through my legal career. So I'm going to hold my head high and stand for the principles that have always guided my career, which is protecting people's rights under our laws and under our Constitution, and help voters to understand that that's what I bring to this race, and hopefully we'll have a chance to declare victory on April 1st.
Well, I appreciate you giving us this much time to talk about these issues.
I appreciate the opportunity, Charles. Thanks so much.
Thanks.